everyone, it's Wacky Anime What If here to present you with What If Issei Was Betrayed and Gained the Betrayal System, Part 1. Let's go ahead and get into this. Currently, Issei Hyodo is heading towards the ORC room, while heading towards the ORC building currently. And it's nighttime. He was called by the ORC for a certain meeting with Sir Zex. Apparently it was about some devil business. Issei is currently reminiscing while walking towards the building, getting closer, thinking about the times where he was a pervert and everything. Thinking about the times where he always just thought about tits and ass, never about the person attached to it, until he finally joined the ORC. He changed his ways, and honestly, he stopped being too much of a pervert. He doesn't just look in the locker rooms anymore or anything. He just faded out of that phase, and he's starting to think to himself, I did a lot of things to come to where I am now. As he says this out loud, while Drake ends up appearing and says, I agree, partner. At first, I thought that you weren't going to be a very good host for me, or a good partner. And immediately, Issei takes offense to that and says, hey. And then he says, but you proved me wrong. After every turn and twist, you've ended up getting stronger and stronger. You didn't let the negative things people said get to you. You didn't let people break your will. You proved that your will is literally unbreakable and stronger than a dragon's rage and stronger than a dragon's pride. And you've also proven that, well, people can make the most unlikeliest of friends, considering you managed to befriend me, the Red Dragon, and become one of the best Red Dragon Emperors I've ever had. And honestly, I actually very much enjoy your company. And immediately Issei says, yeah, well, thanks. I enjoy your company too, Drake. As he says this, Drake smiles in the gear. Then he starts crying and says, the kids grow up so fast. While Issei says, I don't remember you being my dad. While Drake says, I don't remember me not being your dad. While Issei says, no. While Drake says, you don't want a dragon, daddy? While Issei says, those words should never come out of your mouth. That just sounded so weird. While Drake says, yeah, that sounded kind of weird it coming out too. Can we just ignore that happened? While Issei says, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get that out of my head. Anyway, maybe we can finally get that nickname out. You know, the one everyone calls me in the underworld. While Drake just starts shivering and cries more. He says, the Opie Dragon, the worst nickname I've ever received from a host. For my host. It is unbearable. Please fix that. While Issei starts chuckling and says, yeah, I might just keep it just to hold it over your head a little bit. As they start to chuckle to themselves, as Issei walks closer to the building of the ORC, and Drake feels something off, and so does Issei. Issei just ignores it, while Drake is on the offensive and stays out. And Issei just ignores what Drake is doing, because he feels a sense of dread getting closer. As he walks into the building, he walks up to the ORC door, and he's about to open it. But Drake just says, Issei, I highly suggest for you to leave. There are harmful energies in there. Very dark and very hostile. I suggest we leave right now. After all, I sent Sir Zex and the rest of the ORC with Graphia. They're literally all there, and they have hostile energy towards the door. As soon as you open that door, Sir Zex is going to blast you with POD, Power of Destruction magic. He's going to literally use that against you. He's going to shoot you immediately as you open that door. I can sense the power rising into his hand. Issei, we need to get out of here. While Issei says, I don't believe that. Maybe you're just on edge. After all, we've had quite the tough battles and everything. And honestly, I believe the ORC. I mean, they wouldn't kill me. They're family to me. As he puts his hand towards his heart and says, I've treated them like family. They treated me like it. Even though they've avoided me for a few weeks, it's probably because they just wanted time alone. Or because they're tired of my annoying perverted antics, and I've managed to correct that. And they probably have already seen that. That's the reason why they called me. They're probably just a little ticked. While Issei's saying this, Drake is saying, no, it's not that. Issei, don't open the door. As Issei is reaching for the door, and he says, plus, I saved Rias countless times, especially from the marriage of Riser. I've also saved Koneko from her sister. I've also made it to where they made up. They actually start to care for each other after the misunderstanding of how she left her. And also, I managed to make Akeno accept her other half. Made her accept that she's both a fallen angel and a devil. And I helped Kiba, my blood brother, with the sword experiment stuff. And the fact of him getting over his friends that have died. And honestly, I've helped Sir Zex in the underworld more times than I can count. Same with Graphia. They wouldn't do this to me. I trust them as a family, and as my best friends. Aside from you, Drake, he says with a smile, as Issei opens the door, and Drake is screaming and begging for him not to. As soon as he opens the door, he smiles, and he has his eyes closed, and is expecting for a warm welcome, until he feels something pierce directly through his chest, and he feels immense pain. He opens his eyes, and he sees that a beam of POD has just went out of Sir Zex's pointer finger that was pointing directly at the door and went through his chest. Immediately, Issei falls to the ground, motionless, and blood starts to pour out of the hole in his chest. And Issei can't move. He can't even speak that well right now, as he's coughing up more blood rapidly. As Sir Zex says, now all we need to do is take the sacred gear from the brat. As he walks closer towards Issei, he grabs Issei's arm that has Drake on it, while Drake is screaming out, saying, Why? Why would you do such a thing? He saved all of you. He saved the underworld countless times. He saved the factions from wars. He has literally single-handedly helped all of you more times than I can count. He helped Akeno accept herself when no one else would accept her for what she was. He's accepted Koneko. He accepted them all. He accepted their burdens and everything that came with it. He even helped Rias get out of her marriage with that prick Riser. Why would you do such a thing? Why? The Drake screams out in pain and agony for his friend, and is crying inside the sacred gear, screaming and wanting to be released so he can show these devils their place. As Sir Zex says, because he's weak and useless, and he can't even use you properly, as he tears off Issei's arm with Drake attached to it. And immediately Issei screams in pain, startling everyone because well, Sir Zex thought that Issei was dead already, and sees Issei just look up towards Sir Zex, and Sir Zex looks at him and smirks, a sinister smirk, and says, "You're no longer needed. Do any of you have anything to say to this useless waste of life?" Immediately, all of them start stepping forward. First up was Koneko. She walked towards Issei, and then she kicked him directly in the face, causing him to land backwards, landing directly on his back, facing upwards, looking directly at Koneko in the eyes. She looked at him and says, "You're a disgrace. You're the enemy of all women, and I hate your guts. You did help me with Kuroka, bonding back with her, and not getting me kidnapped, yes, I admit. But you are also the most sickest, disgustingest pervert I've ever known in my life." And she continues and says, "And also, you're so idiotic. You don't think before you act. You cause more trouble than actual good. Honestly, I bet your parents are embarrassed that you exist." She says this with as much venom as possible. And Issei feels this. He feels a part of his heart cracking. Or, well, a part of his heart that's currently splattered all over the floor. He feels his mind just breaking a little bit, little cracks forming. And then Akano walks towards him and says, honestly, I'm going to be honest. I actually do like you. I like you as my personal torture toy for my amusement and pleasure. I like you for being so idiotic that you were so easy to manipulate into coming into Reese's barrage. And you help me with my fallen and devil side. And I love you for it, but I also hate you so much. More than you know. I hate you for the general fact that you keep on striving forward. And I hate you for the general fact that you look at women for only their bodies and nothing else. Issei just looks at her and says, huh, wow. And that's coming from the S&M bitch, who honestly begs for punishment over and over. Why don't you go and fuck yourself? He screams out loud, causing everyone to get shocked. And he immediately says, oh yeah, one more thing. Your dad and mom are probably so embarrassed of you, and they probably hate your guts. They probably hate that you exist, you bitchy priestess. And immediately Akano runs towards him and puts her hand into the blood that's around Issei and starts firing up electricity out of her hands, causing it to go into the blood and go into Issei and start to fry his insides. He starts coughing up more blood, and the blood is starting to turn a dark pitch black. It's the blood itself is starting to get burned crisp. And so is Issei. And Issei's coughing out blood, having blood coming out of his eyes and ears. And he just starts laughing, saying, and Ikiba, you white knight fuck boy, you literally backstabbed me after me and you were sworn blood brothers. I protected you. I bled for all of you. I saved Asya more times than I can count. I saved her from the fallen angels. I saved her from so many other events. I helped her with that jackass that was trying to literally molest you and probably take your sacred gear. And I cried for you. And then he says, Andreas, I saved you from so many things. Your marriage, your pathetic weakness, the fact that you're overgrown fucking whore, and that you self-loathe yourself, and that you are always in the shadow of your brother. As he screams this out, they all get pissed at him. And Asya just looks down in regret. And Kiba just walks towards him with his eyes just covering, his hair covering his eyes, and then summons a sword from his sword berth. It was a katana. Then he shoves it directly into the back of Issei's neck, causing Issei to cough out more blood and for him not to be able to speak anymore. Then Rias walks towards Issei, and right when she walks towards Issei, and she says, I have some final words to tell you, she whispers into Issei's ear and says, would you die for me? And Issei has flashbacks of Rainier, and then with the last words he can muster, he says, did you send her? While Rias says, of course I did. If she killed you, I could revive you, and you'd be my little loyal dog. Be at my beck and call, and get me out of my arranged marriage with that riser prick. And also, it was so adorable seeing you wag your tail just for little old me. She has her hand on her chest, while Issei just has tears running down his eyes. Then he looks towards Serzex, who has the sacred gear in his hand, saying, Drake, now let me use your power or I'll eliminate you, while firing up his POD into Drake, causing Drake to crack a little bit, considering that Serzex did so many experimental drugs on himself that his POD has increased more, causing it to be on par with the red dragon himself. And it started to crack the sacred gear, and immediately Drake started screaming, "I don't care if I get destroyed. I'll never join you. I'd rather die with my friend, my best partner in the world, and the one person who truly trusted me and cared for me. Issei." He screamed this out as he started screaming in pain, as the gear started cracking more until it completely shattered, and Issei's eyes widened more, and more tears flowed out as the green jewel fell to the ground, slightly cracking and falling all the way and rolling towards Issei. Issei, with his remaining hand, grabbed the jewel and cried and started to think in his mind, "Why did you do it? Why did you die for me? You could have just accepted it. You could have just lived without me. Why would you do such a thing? Why, Drake? Why? You're my best friend. I didn't want to see you die. Why?" As he starts crying more, as Drake started speaking to his mind and said, "Because me and you were friends till the end, right?" As the jewel disappeared, and the energy disappeared, and Issei's tears were running down even faster before his eyes started growing a dull, lifeless pitch black, and he fell to the ground. His head fell to the ground, while all the blood flowed out of his body. Issei is in a completely pitch black state, but before his head fell down to the ground, he saw words in front of him and a blurred screen saying, "Do you want another chance for your revenge for their betrayal? Do you want the betrayal system? Do you want the ability to destroy them all and have them cower before your feet?" And Issei just screamed in his head, "Yes," before falling down and letting the cold embrace of death consume him. Before POV change, Issei woke up and sprung out of his bed, and then he looks around and sees that his bed is no longer as huge. His room isn't as huge anymore, and there's a lot of differences. This looks like when he was first in his room without all the arrangements being held, and Issei is just questioning, was that real? Before a screen appeared in front of him saying, "Hello, user. I'm the betrayal system, and you have 2 skills that have been unlocked. One skill you've already acquired, and one is an optional skill. You can select between 2 options." And Issei immediately says, "What are you?" As the system says, "I'm the betrayal system. I'm the system that rewinded time for you and put you back in time and gave you power. You were able to level up through dungeons and things like that as a normal system, but you have these things called betrayal points and the betrayal shop, which is always open for you. They give you skills that are based on betrayal and backstabbing and will let you enact your revenge more. And also, they let you do certain missions. You can also buy missions." Immediately, Issei perked up and said, "What are my stats? After all, if your system, I'm assuming that they're stats." As the betrayal system says, "Clever. Now aren't you?" As the stats appeared, and Issei just looks at them, and his eyes widen. And that's where I'm going to end. Just kidding. His eyes widen because he sees his luck is -100. What the fuck? And he just screams this out loud. And that's where I'm going to end. What if Issei was betrayed and gained the betrayal system? I hope you all enjoyed, and if you did, make sure you smash that like button.